everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be ranking all of the booktok books that I have read. It is quite a few. These are all books that I've seen consistently recommended on booktok over and over again over the years. If I saw a booktok table at the bookstore, these are the books that I would expect to see on that table. There's definitely quite a few books that I've read that I've seen recommended on booktok that I haven't included here just because I feel like they're not like consistently being recommended. So I really wanted to try and capture those like core booktok books. Going through these, I was a little surprised that a lot of these are kind of on the lower end for me. And they're also, a lot of these are books that I read a while ago. I feel like I don't really read as many kind of mainstream booktok books nowadays. And I think that's partly because a lot of the books that I have read from booktok that are frequently recommended have let me down. I don't know if that's just because they, weren't for me, or they were just so overhyped that I went in with really high expectations. But of course, these are just my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions. If you really enjoyed these books, I love that for you, but a lot of these just weren't for me. But I did think it would be fun to kind of go through these and rank them, because I know these are books that a lot of people have read and are very popular. And so I just wanted to kind of share this with you guys, and then maybe get some more booktok recs, from this video. Okay, so I have picked 5 categories for my books. The first is really solid book I'd recommend. This is like a high 4-star read for me. None of these books, like looking back, are 5-star reads. So we're starting with like 4.5 star for the top category. Then I enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable. This is like a high 3-star for me. I remember like liking the book. I like rated it highly, but I can't really remember anything about it. And I feel like if I can't remember a lot about a book, then it's not really like a high rating for me. So that's my reasoning behind that. And then I have I Could Take It or Leave It. These are like the middle 3-star reads. That it was okay. Like I wouldn't feel like heartbroken if I like hadn't read it. I don't feel like I need it in my life. Then Pretty Bad, Not Sure Why This Book Is Popular. Those are like 2-star reads. Like the plot's bad, character development is bad. There's just like something like wrong with the book, and I was kind of struggling to get through it. And I just didn't really understand, or I don't understand, why the book is so popular. And then finally, I Wish I Could Wipe It From My Memory. These are like my 1-star reads that I really didn't enjoy at all, and probably should have just DNF'd. So that's my ranking. I've divided my books up, starting with romance books, then getting into kind of like romantasy, fantasy, no, romantasy, cozy fantasy, and then kind of general fiction. So, starting off with the romance books, we're starting with Red, White, and Royal Blue. This is one of the first booktok books I actually read. I think I'm going to put this in the Could Take It or Leave It category. I remember not really super enjoying this book, but I also don't remember completely hating it. If I'm remembering correctly, the characters got together way too early for my liking, and I don't really like when that happens. And so I feel like there wasn't like enough tension built up between the two characters. I know they recently turned this one into a movie. I haven't actually seen the movie, and I feel like the movie might be better because it sounds like there's like a little bit more substance to it. But this one I just like didn't super love, and like I would be fine if I hadn't read it. I do want to check out some of her other books, and I love how she writes about queer characters, but this one just like was not it for me. And I mean, it was fine, so wouldn't read again and probably wouldn't recommend either. Next we have The Hating Game. This was also kind of an earlier booktok book for me. I'm putting this in the pretty bad category. The only thing I remember from this book is that he painted his bedroom her eye color, and they weren't like friends, they were like work enemies. They didn't talk to each other, and it's just so weird and odd and kind of stalkerish, and I didn't really like that. I remember her parents also owning like a strawberry farm or something. But that's all I've got from that book. I've heard some of her other books are kind of weird too. So yeah, this was a no for me. Pretty bad romance book, in my opinion. Then we had Archer's Voice. This is about a woman who like moves to a town and there's a man there and he's mute, and she like befriends him and then like he falls in love with her. I think I'm gonna put this in the could take it or leave it because I don't super remember a lot about it. I rated it pretty highly. Um, and I remember enjoying reading it, but like looking back, she kind of like forced her way into his life when he maybe didn't want her to, pushed personal boundaries, which I don't really know how I feel about that. So, not very good. So it's going in the take it or leave it category. This was supposed to be like a sad book, and it wasn't really that sad to me. Um, it was maybe felt a bit like it was kind of pushing the sadness onto the reader, which I don't super love. But again, I rated it really highly, so I know when I read it, I really enjoyed it. But like looking back on it, I don't really have any thoughts or opinions on it, so it's really like I could take it or leave it. Then we have Icebreaker. I'm putting this one also in the take it or leave it category simply because the first half of the book I remember really, really enjoying. And then the second half of the book I didn't enjoy solely because it just felt like it was dragging on for too long. So like the story itself, like the writing wasn't bad. It was just like was the plot was bad. You know what I mean? Like it just kept going when it didn't need to. Um, Not really a big hockey romance reader. I think this is one of like two hockey romance books that I've read. Um, and so I don't really have anything to compare it to. I know this one is very well loved as well. This was one where like the spice scenes got like a little bit too much at the end. I was kind of like over it, like I didn't want it anymore. Um, so that would be kind of leaning a bit more to the leave it. But I do remember enjoying reading this book and having fun reading this book. So it's just kind of in the middle for me. Then we have the X Hex. I'm putting this in, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable. This is like a witchy romance. It was very cheesy, very predictable, but it did have like a supernatural twist to it, and it had kind of like an underlying like supernatural plot line. So there was a little bit more to it than just the romance, which I do really enjoy with romance books. And like as a witchy romance, I feel like it kind of ticked all the boxes. Is this an amazing book? No, I don't really remember a lot about it. But that being said, I did enjoy it for what it was, which was a Halloween romance. There are two other books following the X Hex. I actually read the third one recently, which is more like a Christmassy read. But these are just kind of a fun, silly, quick palate cleanser. So I would say I would still recommend these under the condition, knowing that it's just a cheesy Halloween romance. Like, it's not great writing, but like it fulfills its purpose. Then we have Flawless by Elsie Silver. This is the whole Chestnut Spring series. These are cowboy romance books. I really like these books. I've only rated all of these like 3.5 stars, but I'm actually gonna put it in the really solid because I really enjoy reading these. Yes, they're like repetitive, but I always recommend these to people because like I love the idea of a cowboy romance. Realistically, no, but the idea of it I love, and this series just kind of captures that. There's like the big family, and each of the different family members have their own book, and they all have kind of different tropes. This is one of the few series where I can actually get behind a pregnancy trope, and didn't have an issue with it. Also, single dad trope, didn't have an issue with it. Normally I don't really go for that, so I feel like the fact that like I really enjoyed it so much and it still had those tropes is enough to put it up high enough for me. So again, I feel like the writing is like fine, but still very enjoyable as a cowboy romance, and I have definitely recommended this to multiple people. And if you haven't read this series and you like cowboy romance, what are you doing? This is like the cowboy romance series. Or if you haven't read any cowboy romance, you should still check this out because it's just really dang good. So next we have Funny Feelings. Oh god. um I'm gonna have to put this in white from my memory. This was a book that I read for book club, and I really didn't like it. She's a stand-up comic. I don't really like stand-up comedy, period. And so having it written out and like reading it to myself just was even worse. The romance was weird. This was a single dad trope I didn't like. Um, and I just like did not enjoy this. The like tension and chemistry between them was just like forced and like not great. This book is really well loved. I don't really get like I know like romance is romance and like you kind of hold it to like a different standard than like other books, but this is like a bad romance. So, in my opinion, I would never recommend this book. And I really wish I just DNF'd it because I wasted my time reading it. So, that's my thoughts on that. Then we have the love hypothesis. I'm kind of counting love hypothesis, love on the brain, and love theoretically all kind of clumped together because those are all just like STEMmy romances, and I ate them up. I recommend these books all the time. Yeah, they're like really repetitive, and you know what's gonna happen. And every single book has followed the exact same plot line in a different font, and yet I still ate it up and I still loved it. And maybe that's because I work in a STEMmy field that it's fun to read a romance book set in a STEM setting. But yeah, I think they're really fun. Every single one of these, Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, and Love Theoretically, I read in under 24 hours because I just like could not put it down. So, I know there's mixed feelings about this book, but I really enjoyed it, and I would reread it. So, it's like a good comfort read. Okay, then we have the Emily Henry books that I've read. Starting off with Beach Read, I'm putting it under I enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable because I remember rating it highly and thinking it was okay, but can't really remember anything about it. I remember they're like two competing authors, and they went to college together, and they were like college nemesis. Not sure what the right word is there. But beyond that, don't know. Um, Yeah. So my sister wanted me to read Beach Read before People We Meet on Vacation because she said People We Meet on Vacation was better. But I'm gonna put People We Meet on Vacation and Take It or Leave It because I thought it was kind of boring. I didn't like the back and forth plot line. The characters fell flat to me, and the kind of friends to lovers romance that was supposed to be happening, I just like didn't really pick up on that. So didn't love that one. But then Book Lovers, I did really like. And I read this one for book club. I really enjoyed it. I liked both the main characters. I thought the plot was super fun. I thought there was kind of a good balance of the romance and the fiction going on, which I always really enjoy. And I mean, it's a book about people who read books for a living, or review books for a living. So, like, what's not to love? I don't think I'm going to be reading any other Emily Henry books. I don't really feel a pull to read any more Emily Henry books. I know Happy Place, and then what was the other one that just came out? I can't remember. Funny Story. I don't know if I'm going to read either of those. I don't really have an opinion about them. Obviously, because I haven't read them. I don't really have an opinion about Emily Henry. I like don't feel like you know, I feel like I've read enough Emily Henry with the three that I've read. So, um, yeah, that's where I'm at with that. Then we have My Roommate is a Vampire. This one's a more recent kind of BookTok rec, and this one's going in I could wipe it from my memory because it was so bad and I really wish I DNF'd it. This was one of those books where the first half of the book was like one plot line and the second half was like another plot line that just came out of like left field and didn't really make any sense. The writing was bad, character development was like non-existent, and then there was like a big secret that was revealed at the end that was like the dumbest thing I'd ever read. And I just don't really get why this book is popular. And I know a second one just came out, and I won't be reading it because I hated this book. And I will tell anybody who tries to pick this book up not to read it because I disliked it so much. And I think it really comes down to the bad writing. So, yeah. Um, then getting into I guess, My Roommate is a Vampire is kind of a romantic paranormal romance. I don't know. They kind of cross boundaries, right? A Touch of Darkness is a Hades and Persephone retelling. Um, I read the first three. I'm putting it in the could take it or leave it category because the first two books were 5-star reads for me. The third book was like a 2-star. It was so bad. I think this book could have been a standalone and didn't need to be a series. I do love Hades and Persephone. Lore Olympus, adore. But I feel like Hades and Persephone has been done so many times that you really need to do it well if you're gonna do a Hades and Persephone retelling. And it lost it in the third book for me. So, yeah, I just like don't really have much else to say about it. Like if I recommend this book to people, I tell them to read the first one and not read any more. Um because that's just really the downfall is the third book. I don't know if maybe it picks it back up in the fourth book, but it like suddenly just turned into like a completely smut book, and I like it was already pretty spicy to begin with, but then that was like all that it was, and I was just like not interested anymore. So I've abandoned that series. And I feel like I would rather check out some other Hades and Persephone retellings instead. Then we have Ice Planet Barbarians. This might be controversial, but I'm putting it up top because I love Ice Planet Barbarians. I've read 5, 6 books in the series. I've been like slowly working my way through them in between um, other books that I've been reading, and collecting the physical copies as they get released. This is one where you know what you're getting, but they're just so fun to read. And it's crazy to me because there's like 12 different girls that like crash landed on this alien planet, and they each get their own story, and even though it's like basically the same at the core, they're still like each different and have their own story. And I think that's a sign of a good writer when they're able to write characters with very distinctively different personalities. You're not reading like the same character over and over again in every single book in different fonts. So yeah, these are just fun, silly read. If you want like a monster, spicy alien romance book, then this is like top of the line. Like, definitely worth reading. At least read the first one if you haven't read any of them. Like, you gotta experience it. Um, then we have Blood Mercy, which I saw recommended on booktok so many times for people who liked Blood and Ash, Court of Thorns and Roses. Like if you just wanted like a really good romantic series to become obsessed with, this was the series for you. And it had 8 books, maybe not 8 books. It had a lot of books, and they were all on Kindle Unlimited. And I was like, this is perfect. This is gonna be the new series that I'm obsessed with. It was bad. It was so bad. It was like 700 pages of nothing, 700 pages of them talking in the garden the whole time. It was so boring. I didn't care about either of them. Everything that happened could have happened in like 200 pages, if that. And I don't really understand how this is getting dragged out into like a 7 book, 8 book, whatever series. In fact, I can't understand, because if each book is like this, then it probably could have just been condensed into like 2 books. So I've abandoned that one. I really didn't like this book. I should have just DNF'd it, but I was really holding out hope because everyone was like raving about it. And it really let me down. So, I really, yeah, wish I hadn't read it. Then we have Bride. This was pretty bad too. I'm putting it in the not sure why it's popular. It's not so bad that I wish I could wipe it from my memory. However, the world building, not great. Didn't really get the tension build up between the two characters. This was advertised as Omegaverse. It was not Omegaverse. And yeah, not the second half. I would say maybe like the last 100 pages, there was like some stuff that happened, and it just kind of was like, oh, this is happening. Like it like didn't really make sense in like the overarching plot. Like it felt like the book was going one way and then it changed directions at the end. um yeah, this was a real letdown for me. This was like a really highly anticipated release. I was so excited. I love Ali Hazelwood. I love a good like monster, werewolf, vampire, fae, whatever romance. And I thought the stars were aligning, and they were not, because I just she maybe paranormal romance is not her genre, and that's okay. That is okay. Then we have Daughter of No Worlds. I'm gonna put this in. The problem is, I remember really enjoying this book and loving it and giving them all 5 stars, but I can't actually remember what happened. so it's going there. I do remember the first book you could read by itself, and the second and the third book really expand on the world building. It's a very strong female protagonist, a sort of enemies to lovers romance situation going on. The magic system was very unique. Um, yeah, I think if you really like Throne of Glass, you would enjoy this book. Because the kind of strong female character vibe is like the same. Um, but like I said, I don't really remember what happened, so I feel like I can't rate it higher than that because it clearly wasn't memorable because I don't really remember the whole overarching plot. So yeah. Then we have Fourth Wing, BookTok's favorite. This book's bad. I don't get the hype. This one I really don't remember anything from. Like, really don't. I remember them walking that thingy at the beginning and then this huge secret being revealed at the end, and there being dragons. And that's about the extent of what I know about this book. I remember at the time that I thought the world building was terrible. The world building was non existent outside of the college that they're at. The character development was meh. The romance development was non existent to me. I think it was supposed to be like an enemies to lovers, slow burn, whatever. And it was more of like I hate you, I love you kind of situation, which I didn't love. And somebody pointed this out in a review that I read like later that she couldn't really. It seemed like Rebecca Yarros couldn't decide if she wanted it to be set in like medieval fantasy time, you know what I mean, or like modern fantasy time, like an urban fantasy, I guess. Because there was like them like reading like scrolls and stuff, but then she has purple hair or something. So stuff like that, like inconsistencies, like just don't really make sense when you're like building a world out. Really like stand out on paper once you know that they're there. And so I just feel like there's so many dragon fantasies out there, that I don't know. It's very tropey, and I think that's why it's as popular as it is. But um, I'm not reading any more of the books. Yeah, yeah. Then we have Serpent in the Wings of Night. See, this is by the same author of Daughter in Her Worlds, Carissa Broadbent, and I did not really like this one. I think this one has to go in the pretty bad too because it was not good. It's like around a game similar to the Hunger Games where they have to like the last person standing is the winner, but there's vampires, but I don't think they're called vampires. My main issue with this book is you don't really get enough of like the build up to the game or like the background as to why the game is important. Blah blah blah. You're just kind of thrown into it, and it was very boring to me because it was just set in the same place the whole time. The romance, again, the development was funky, um, and I just like really did not enjoy this book at all. Um, and no interest in reading the second book. The ending was extremely predictable, and it just kind of let me down. I was holding off on this until I'd read Daughter of No Worlds, um, that series, because I knew that this one, Serpent and Wings of Night, was not done at the time that I was reading it. And I wanted to read her other series first. And so because I enjoyed Daughter of No World so much, I was really excited for this one, and it just was not good. So yeah, I kind of just have a hatred for vampires that I've read a lot of vampire books, and now a lot of the vampire books that I've read, I just like this is not great. So this is kind of from my downfall vampire era, which might explain why it's rated so bad. But I think vampires aside, like the plot itself was just not enough to save it. Okay, another vampire book from Blood and Ash. This one's also going in pretty bad. Not sure why it's popular. Now, caveat, the first two books I rated 5 stars, really enjoyed. The third book kind of started going downhill. And then the fourth book is where it really plummeted and failed for me. Um, yeah. I think my main issue with this is it became very clear that Jennifer Armentrout didn't know what direction the series was going, and was kind of making it up as she went because stuff that was kind of clarified in the first book was suddenly different in the later books. Also, characters need flaws, and when characters don't have flaws and you know that they can just be like, they'll be fine in the end because they can't, get injured or whatever, it kind of loses its like you kind of lose your interest in the story because you already know that everything's going to be okay in the end. And this one kind of started trending towards that um, by the fourth book. So, yeah, I've abandoned this one. I won't be reading anymore. I don't even think the fifth book has come out yet. She released like a spin-off book and then another spin-off book. So when the fifth book is coming out, I don't know. Maybe she's written herself into a hole. Not really sure. Then we have A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle Jensen. This is like a Norse mythology retelling. I actually read this one pretty recently. Um, I'm putting in the take it or leave it because there were definitely parts of the book that I enjoyed. However, I think overall this book was like not the best. Um, I think the pacing was really off. Some parts moved a lot quicker than they should have. Like the battle scenes just kind of were like rushed through, whereas like the political like scheming, I think was sometimes too much time was spent on that. The ending was extremely predictable as well. I really don't think I'm gonna read the second book. I think it's a duology. I don't think I'm gonna read the second book. I just don't really feel like it's worth my time. Um, but there were aspects of it I did enjoy, but I would not feel bad if I hadn't read it. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything not reading this book. Then we go into the Massiverse. Starting off with Throne of Glass. I'm putting it in the take it or leave it because I definitely enjoyed some of the books in this series, but there were other books that I like didn't really enjoy, and I felt like it dragged on for too long. And I really, really hate when there's like a million different POVs and they're separate for like the whole book, and that is very much what the series is. Um, yeah, I do kind of want to reread it because I feel like I need to give it like another chance because it is so well loved. But like I read it knowing that people really enjoyed it and it just like didn't really live up to my expectations. So why would I waste my time reading an long 8 book series again, knowing that I didn't really super enjoy it the first time? So if anyone has any recs though for books that are similar to Throne of Glass but are not Throne of Glass but are better, I would love to hear it. I've heard that Song of Ice and Fire is very similar, or she got inspiration from Song of Ice and Fire for Throne of Glass. So I would be intrigued to maybe read that and see the comparisons. Then we have Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm putting this in the enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable because I feel like if I didn't see so much discourse about it on TikTok, if I didn't see as much discourse about it on TikTok, I probably wouldn't really remember what happened in this book. Um, yeah, I have to give this series credit because it's what really got me back into reading, but I hate that like so many people view this as like top tier fantasy because there's so many good fantasy books out there um with better writing, better plot lines, like more going on, that I feel like people are maybe like missing out because they're like saying end all be all with ACOTAR. That being said, I still think it's like a really great series to get people kind of into reading fantasy, but um yeah. Um, I have like mixed opinions about it. I mean, I have a special edition copy of Court of Thorns and Roses on my shelf, so I do really enjoy the series, but I feel like I don't know, I don't really recommend this book anymore because I just feel like there's so many other books I would rather recommend over ACOTAR. Then we have Crescent City, which would be in the solid book I'd recommend, but the third book I did not like at all. It was a really big letdown for me. The pacing was terrible. I feel like the story was like rushed at the end, and uh, the main characters were kind of getting on my nerves in the third book, and I feel like it was just like a big letdown. Like there was like so much hype and excitement around the third book because I really enjoyed books 1 and 2, but then book 3 it just kind of was like, okay, well, yeah. So, um, if I hadn't read book 3, it would be up in this solid book I'd recommend. But again, similar to ACOTAR, I don't really recommend Sarah J. Maas anymore. I don't really think she needs recommending. I feel like everyone knows who she is at this point. And I feel like there are other authors that I would rather push than SJM. Then we have Legends and Lattes. I'm putting this in I could take it or leave it because um, I could take it or leave it. It's a cozy fantasy. A lot of people talk about this book as like the cozy fantasy. I heard someone compare it to like playing a video game where like each chapter is a level, which I didn't really get before reading it, but having read it makes total sense. My big issue with this one is there was not enough going on. It was too cozy, too whimsical for me. I need like a little bit of something happening. And this one just like didn't really have that for me, which is a big letdown because it just sounded like perfect, and yeah, it was just fine. Also in the cozy fantasy category, we have House in the Cerulean Sea. This one I really enjoyed. Um, I love found family. It was like sweet and like you fell in love with all the characters. It was very cozy, but there was enough like tension that you were still kind of like, wanting to keep reading, turn the page because you wanted to figure out what's going to happen. This one did make me cry. That was unexpected. I love when a book surprises me and makes me emotional. So that's great. Um, I do think that the book, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, is very similar to this book. I don't really see that one recommended on booktok, hence why I haven't included it. But I think that book is actually better than House in the Cerulean Sea, and it follows a very similar plot line. So if you do really enjoy House in the Cerulean Sea, I would recommend that one as well. But I do recommend the two because I just love a found family book. And this is like what a cozy fantasy should be to me. Like, it is cozy at its core, but there's still like some conflict that still keeps you like engaged, and wanting to keep reading. Then we have Half a Soul. This one I've seen recommended a few times on Cozy Fantasy side of TikTok. This one I'm putting in pretty bad, not sure why it's popular. This book's like 200 pages and it took me like 3 weeks to get through, which just like didn't really care about the characters. I wasn't interested in the story. It's set in like a Victorian era um, fantasy. The writing style was like third person, and I did not. I'm not normally have an issue with POV, but like the way that this one was written, like it really stood out to me, and like I could only focus on that when I was reading it. And yeah, I just like wasn't really interested to know what was gonna happen next. So this was kind of a big letdown for me. I have almost bought this book so many times that I decided to borrow it from the library, and thank God I did because yeah, it was a disappointment. Then we have Priory of the Orange Tree. This one's going and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable, which kind of pains me because the Bonesies and her other series I absolutely love. But I can't really remember what happened in this one. I remember thinking that we moved on way too fast at the end. Like it built up to this huge like plot point, and then it just kind of happened and it was over. And I feel like that's like something that a lot of fantasy books do, and it's like really disappointing when it happens because it like ruins the whole book. I do have this sequel, no, not sequel, the prequel book on my shelf, which I do want to read at some point. Um, and I feel like maybe having read the sequel before the Priory of the Orange Tree might have made it a bit more enjoyable because this book definitely kind of leapt right into the world building, and I got a little bit confused. So, um, but I know this book is really well loved. I don't think it needs to be as long as it is, but the concept was fun, and I do remember enjoying parts of it, but I think overall, for all that build up for like such a like at the end was just kind of like, okay, it's over. Then we have Ninth House by Lee Bardugo. I'm gonna say I'm not sure why it's popular. I didn't really enjoy this one. This one was like a real chore to get through. I thought the world building was confusing. It's about like a bunch of different like houses, societies at like a college. They all had very similar names. I was constantly flipping back to the front to try and figure out who was who. This one had a back and forth timeline, which I don't really love. And there was some kind of like traumatic stuff that just kind of brushed over. So I just didn't super love this one. And I just thought it was kind of boring. So, yeah. Masters of Death, enjoyed it but wasn't memorable. I read this one pretty recently. I liked reading it. I enjoyed reading about the cast of characters. The whole book kind of revolves around this game, and the game was never really explained, and I didn't really understand it even after finishing the book, and I don't like that. So, um, this one had vampires in it and it's rated pretty highly, so that's good, but there was also not vampires in it as well. This was fun. It like messed with like different like belief systems, different kind of supernatural creatures, kind of bring them all together in one world, which I did think was really interesting. I do want to try reading some other Olivia Blake, but this was a great kind of standalone to read from her. I thought it was pretty good. Then we have Caraval. Um, I would say take it or leave it. The first book I remember thinking was pretty decent. The second book was just the first book, but with the other sister. And then the third book just kind of went off the rails and felt sort of unnecessary. I feel like this could have easily been just like a standalone. I don't think it needed books 2 and 3. I do want to read Once Upon a Broken Heart because I know one of the characters from Caraval is the main character in Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I really liked his character in this series, so I do want to go kind of read his series. Um, but I just thought this book was kind of boring and like didn't really make any sense. Also, it was very obviously YA. And as someone who doesn't super love reading YA, that was difficult for me to get through. Then we have The Cruel Prince. This is also a take it or leave it, simply because I don't remember anything. I remember hating that it was like the real world and she like went to Target and then she went back to like I think it's called Elfhame, is the Fairyland, whatever. Um, the like thing with like a Cardan that everyone like obsesses over. I don't know if there's like more in like books 2 and 3, but I just was like, okay. Um, and this one also was very obviously YA, just like the writing style. So everyone says this is not a book about romance, it's like about political relations, etc., etc. But like even that I feel like was boring and uninteresting from what I can remember. So yeah, this was kind of a letdown for me. I was like really looking forward to this, but it was not great. Six of Crows, also going to could take it or leave it. Um, I think this book didn't need to be 2 books. I think it could have just been 1 book. I also am not big on heist books, and I didn't realize it was a heist book. Um, Probably because I didn't read the back. I just read it because everyone was talking about it. And yeah, it was I. Um, this one, she throws you just into the world building, and it took me a while to kind of figure out what was going on. I didn't really care about any of the characters. There was like a big dramatic moment in the second book, and I was like, okay, don't really care. So that should tell you how connected I was with the characters. So this one was, again, yeah, just like a bit of a letdown for me. And I'm not going to be reading her other series, Shadow and Bone, because apparently that one is not as good as Six of Crows. And then as I've read Ninth House as well and didn't really enjoy it, I think I just don't super love her writing style. And so I will give up on her. Then we have Divine Rivals. I'm putting this in the I enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable because I absolutely loved the first book. The second book was fine. Um, this was another one that I feel like didn't need to be 2 books. It could have been 1 book. The first book was very romance heavy. The second book tried to explore the fantasy aspect, and it fell short because the romance wasn't there. The story was boring. Um, yeah, the ending was kind of stupid, and I just don't really understand why there needed to be 2 books. This was a really big letdown for me as well because I love Divine Rivals and I was so excited to read Ruthless Vows, and I like went and got it the day that it came out, and then it was just like fine. So um, I'm not abandoning Rebecca Ross. I do want to read some of her other books. I do have another one on my shelf, but this one's definitely more on the heavy side of the romance and the fantasy, and because the romance is not there in the second book, you can really start to see the flaws in the story. So yeah, then we have Verity. I'm actually gonna put this crazy. I don't like Coho. In the end, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't memorable. simply because this one is like different from everything else she's written. It's a mystery thriller. I'm not super into mystery thriller, but I did read this one in 24 hours. I was interested in the story. The main character is weird AF. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. I think it was just like a little odd. But I read it so quickly, and I do remember wanting to keep going, and I feel like that is a sign of a good book. I'm also convinced that Koho didn't write this, that she had a ghostwriter, because none of her other books were like this. And that would be kind of funny because the book is about a ghostwriter. So, also have It Ends With Us. This is pretty bad. So many mixed emotions about this book. Don't understand why it's advertised as a romance. Don't really understand why it's so popular. So many aspects of this book are really cringy. I think the way that the um, PR was handled for this book was done poorly. And then, of course, there's all the drama with the movie. So, I think if you're going to read a book about domestic violence, there's probably better books out there for you. Because this one was just not good. Yeah, bad writing. Um, and the story was just kind of like, okay. So that's my thoughts on that. Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This was a really solid book I'd recommend. This was also one that I read pretty early on in my book talk journey. I love Greek mythology retellings. The writing in this is like gorgeous, stunning, beautiful. This one did not make me sob like a lot of people said it did. It did make me shed a few tears at the end, but like you already know, if you're familiar with Greek mythology, you already kind of know what's gonna happen. But she like the way that she writes, you like develop this like connection with the characters, so then you do feel really sad at the end, even though it's like I knew this was coming. But the writing in this is just beautiful. And that reason alone, I would recommend it. Same with Circe, also by Madeline Miller, another great mythology retelling. Gorgeous writing. This one's strong female protagonist. I think she did a really good job of putting kind of like a feminist twist on Greek mythology without pushing it too far, which I think they sometimes can be. But I really enjoyed this one as well. I actually cannot wait. I think she's writing another book right now, and I'm really looking forward to it because these two were just so good. Then we have The Midnight Library. Very predictable. Yeah, I like predicted what was going to happen within the first like 50 pages. Um, just like a very like common like story plotline that you see that's been like twisted each and every way. And so it just didn't really feel very unique to me. I didn't really connect with the main character. And like, yeah, like the message was cute, I guess, but I feel like there's better books to read about like being like, oh my god, my life is not so bad. I actually like the life I live. That you could go out and read instead of The Midnight Library. Then we have The Nightingale. I don't really super love historical fiction, but this one was really well written. It's about two sisters during World War II in France. It was very sad. Didn't make me cry, but I do think like the way that the story was written was done really well. I think Kristen Hannah's writing is like really great. And yeah, if you like historical fiction, definitely like worth checking out. I feel like a lot of people who like historical fiction have already read Kristen Hannah, but there's a reason that like she's so good at writing that genre and why so many people read that. So then we have Malibu Rising. I'm putting this one in take it or leave it. I don't like super love TJR's writing. This one was kind of boring. There wasn't a lot going on. Didn't really care about any of the characters. Also, I feel like this book you needed to kind of know about the TJR universe. I think people were like referenced from other books, which I didn't really super get because I didn't really remember anyone from her other books, but B, haven't really read a lot of her books. So it was just okay. I would say it was one of the better. Daisy Jones and the Six, I did enjoy. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I think the only reason I enjoyed it was because I listened to it on audiobook. It was like listening to a podcast. Um, but I don't know why I went in expecting a romance, and I think because BookTok pushes everything as a romance, and everything is not a romance. Um, so, um, if you're gonna read this one, definitely worth listening to the audiobook. And I know that a lot of people really enjoyed this, really enjoyed the TV show. Um, but I'm just like not really a general fiction person. And so for that reason, because it was just kind of like the story of their lives and nothing else was really super going on beyond that, it was just fine for me. Then we have Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I'm also putting in take it or leave it because I didn't really enjoy this book. I don't really remember it. I remember finishing it and thinking it was fine. Didn't predict the twist at the end, and I was also really confused why the girl was so mad about the twist at the end. It didn't really make any sense to me. But again, this one's also super well loved. So, um, yeah, it was fine. I'm not super into like the Hollywood fame sort of that kind of setting for books, so maybe that's why I didn't enjoy it as much. But yeah, I just don't really like TJR's writing. These are the three that I've read, and I'm not reading anymore because each of her books, I'm like, yeah, this is fine. So, um, and maybe that's just a me problem, but yeah, I just don't super love her writing style. So, yeah. Okay, thank you for sitting with me as I rank these books. I would love to hear what you guys think about these popular book talk books in the comments. And let me know if there's any really popular book talk books that I haven't included here that I should read. Because I would love to read some more good books off of Book Talk. I know there are some, but maybe I'm just looking in the wrong places. Or maybe I've just written books off because I'm just expecting them to be bad. So would love to hear it, but thank you for listening. And I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.